All right. Good morning, everybody. We learned Lilu Nishmat Avigdor Chayavram Ben Meretz Sivarachalea, and today, as I says, my father's yard site, Binyamin Ben Zev Avi Mori, Zichrono Livracha, his fourth yard site. Also for Neran Chaim Ben Rachel Perla Ofer, that was died after having been injured, lying in bed many days. And of course, also Yonadav ben Mordechai Leora Levenstein, who they're still sitting Shiva. And also Refuah Shlema to all those who have been injured, and all of our boys and girls, men, women, children, literally, all should come back healthy and safe. Okay. Last week we touched on the topic. We're in the first Mishnah. We're going to conclude the first Mishnah, go into the second Mishnah today. But before we do, there is a question that was raised by the audience. And one of the things I'd mentioned was, why does it say that Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai? So one of the reasons given, not the reason, but one was the humility of Hashem. Not even to mention Hashem's name and relationship with the receiving of the Torah, the giving of the Torah. And there was one person bothered by that. Why, of all places, why would Hashem's humility? This is God, as it was said to me. This is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. This is I am the Lord your God. And all. So the issue is that it's been taken out of context. What I mean by that, we're looking at the moment Moshe gets the Torah, and we're saying that Hashem's. Oh, I forgot to do this. Sorry, 1 second. And we are saying that Hashem's name is not mentioned because of humility. Well, it's concurrent with Anochi Hashem Elokecha. That's first of all. It's not separate events. It's the same basic timing. But besides it, this is a Gemara. It tells us as follows. Gemara Megillah Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Kol makom she'ata motzei gvurato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Wherever you find written the power, the might of Hashem, ata motzei an v'tanuto. You also find his humility. It's said once in Torah, once in Navi, and for the third time it's mentioned in Ketuvim. And it quotes a number of psukim. I'm going to mention one only, the one in Torah. On the one hand, it says Hashem is Lord of is your God. He's the God of gods, the Lord of lords. And the next pasuk says, He also does judgment for the people who are yatomim, for I say yatom in English, orphans, thank you, and widows. Now we actually do this in davening. We say in the very first paragraph of Shmona Esrei, which in our Tefillah class we'll get to probably about 2-3 months from now. Ezrat Hashem. Hashem is Hakel Hagadol Hagibor Vanora Kel Elyon. He's this magnificent, unbelievable, Gomel Chasadim Tovim. He does all these little chasadim. Does have a little like in Lahavda. He's saying that he's the president of the country, and he's royal, and he's regal, and he's got this magnificent home, and he does everything, and he comes and helps fill the potholes in the street. So it's not necessarily a satisfactory answer, okay, but it's the only one I have at the moment. I will have to look further, because when I have when I feel that the question is better than the answer, it makes me want to look further. So I'll continue, and don't let me off the hook. Okay, I know you won't. I mean, if that hadn't been you that asked it, I'm just, huh? If the question came up, is explaining is that on the one hand, Hashem is the Kura. Hashem is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and Lo Yeh Lecha Elohim Elohim Achrei Panai. And at the same time, we look at Hashem as teaching us humility, which is why Hashem's name is not mentioned in the Mishnah of having been the one to give the Torah to Moshe, but is mentioning Sinai instead of Hashem. Okay, fine. That's not necessarily a great answer. My assumption is the question's asked elsewhere, so I'm going to look further. Okay, that satisfy you? Sure. Temporarily. Tough to crack here, eh? Okay, so let's move along before someone starts throwing things at me. Okay. We are going to just to take a quick look again at the first Mishnah. After the discussion of the Mesorah, it says, "Hey, shlosha dvarim." Again, the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah said 3 things: "Hevu metunim badin," be calm and careful, diligent about din, about law. Hamidu tamidim harbe, you should have many students, and asusia Torah, you should make a protection for the Torah. So we're going to talk about all 3 of those first. I remember Dafka last year, the week of my father's yard sale, I lost my voice. So I was doing, I did the Haftarah that Shabbat. I sound like a frog. I guess it's this time of year, whatever. In any case, okay, so let's go through these one at a time. Havu Metunim Badin. It literally means be calm when rendering judgment. So it would seem that when you start off the whole set of Pirke Avot to talk about something that seems to be limited to just judges or lawyers or whatever, it just doesn't seem to add up. Something's missing here. So we have to talk about that. What exactly are we talking about? So it can be referring to people who have to render decisions. No, don't rush to judgment. You have to make a proper judgment. It could also be a something to each one of us. Each one of us is a judge in a sense. We have to judge ourselves. And unfortunately, the negative is that people do tend to judge others, and you cannot do that, right? You have to, it says, we're going to see later in Pirkei Avot about until you are really in such a person's place, which you could never be, don't judge them, therefore don't judge them. But I saw something really, another thing is that a judge or a person who's trying to make a decision that has to do with not just a philosophical decision, but also a halachic decision when you need to ask a question, when you yourself are trying to make a decision. Think, don't rush. Mistakes are made that way. I will tell you from my own personal experience. I've made mistakes rendering decisions because I just made certain assumptions or I ran through it. I just, okay, I assumed certain things, I read it wrong, or whatever it might be. Take your time, especially when it impacts somebody else. But there's also another possibility. We know that every day there's some form of din in this world, there's some form of judgment in the world. We also know rachamim. Hashem has boundless mercy because no one would exist. You're like, okay, off of his head. When we see things aren't going great for us, and that means that for some reason there's a din, there's a judgment against us for that moment, that for whatever reason we have to go through yisurin or trials and tribulations, be calm about it, accept it, ahava. It's not easy, not easy. In some cases, it's nearly impossible. But to accept what we are given from Hashem, bi'ahava. No one here is happy about what's going on right now with the war. The only happy part is that we have killed over 2,000 Hamas Yimach Shemamin in Kain Yerbu. They made some amazing strides so far. I think personally, what I've read seems to be going much faster than they expected. They've encircled Gaza City. They've separated the north and the south, and it's going very well. But it's a time of din. It's a time of din. It's a time where the sword is hanging over our heads, literally and figuratively, depending where we are. We have to be calm about it. We have to be careful about it. We have to be careful with ourselves and what we read and watch so that we don't make things worse for ourselves psychologically. And I'm telling telling myself right now, I'm looking at myself right now on the computer. And therefore, that's one of the possibilities, Havu Matinu Badin. Another topic here is Ha'amidu Talmidim Harbe. Now, literally it means to stand up. The Ha'amid means something that's lying down or sitting, and you help them stand up. But it doesn't say teach many students. It says Ha'amidu Talmidim. I'm curious, what does your English say for Ha'amidu Talmidim Harbe? Establish, right? Raise up, establish. Okay, which fits with the English, with the Hebrew as well. So this brings us to a discussion of a few things. There was a time period. There was a difference of opinion between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, which stemmed from Hillel and Shammai themselves, about the idea of whom do you teach Torah? Now, you teach Torah to everybody, but where do you want to put your focus? Do you want to put your focus on the cream of the crop so that you're going to really get some very strong people out there who are going to know Torah and be able to make decisions and all? Or do you try to teach across the board to everyone you can? I'm sure you can guess who held what opinion. Beit Shammai, who was always very much the Takif, who's the stronger one as far as being more whatever, was no, you teach the cream of the crop. Those, like the bright students, work with them and do it as best as you can. And Beit Hillel's opinion, the Hillel school, was teach Torah to everybody. Everyone has a right to get in. There's a famous story, if any of your family members have ever gone through Kita Yud Bet, and they had to do Sifrut, they had to do literature. One of the stories they teach every year, I've taught it, I don't know, half a dozen times at least, is Hillel Rosh Hagag. It's a famous story that Hillel was, every day he went to the Beit Midrash, he had to pay to get in, that's its own story. And then one day he didn't have money to get in, so he climbed on the roof of the Beit Midrash. He's listening through the aruba, like the chimney, and it's the storms and snow gets on him, and he's frozen up there. And one of the points of the story, I'm not getting the whole thing, is if you want to do the whole get bet group with you with that, is the extent with which he went to learn Torah. And wait a minute, there was this guard who was preventing him from coming in unless he paid a certain amount. So maybe it was like that's not right, and that's where his school of thought came of everyone has the right to walk into learn, right? Want to walk into Birkat Moshe up the hill? B'simcha, come and learn Torah. Yes, this institution has to pay tuition. Yes, they have to support themselves. It's understandable, but you don't turn someone away who wants to learn Torah. So on the one hand, this is a decision that's made by the Ashek Knesset HaGdolah. The goal is teach Torah to as many students as you can. That's the one. That's the simplest meaning. There's another few possibilities here. Laha'amid means, I said before, to stand upright, to put upright. So it's not just enough to teach Torah. You have to make sure that the Torah is understood, that they can stand on their own 2 feet with what you're giving them. That's also what it means. It's not just, wow, I've taught, I can tell you over the years since I started teaching, taking all the classes into account, adults and students, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Wow, makes me a great tzaddik? No, it doesn't mean anything if they don't know something because I taught them, right? I can just sit here and spew shtuyot. Whoa, look all the students I have, big deal, right? It's because the goal is that I want to make sure that people understand what I'm saying and then they can incorporate that and use it. Not every word I say is a diamond, but hopefully some things come out and are accepted to make an impression on someone as far as making a change. So that's another one. There's another possibility. Not everyone can sit and learn. I mean, if I'm looking forward, Bezrat Hashem, in a few more months to be able to have more time to sit and learn when I'm finished with school this year. That's a privilege I'm going to give myself. Some people have the privilege, they sit and they learn at Kollel, they sit and learn extra hours that I maybe never have that opportunity to do. It's not true. I do. I just don't take advantage of it. So what do people do? They do what's called the Yisachar Zvulun partnership. We know that Yisachar and Zvulun partnership is that one would learn and one would go out to work. So they would support, pay, give a stipend to a Kollel student or give money to a family that has someone learning. That whole idea of everyone learning in Kollel is its own chapter to discuss. They say the old joke is how many boys are learning in Lakewood? About half of them. So, okay, but the idea of supporting a Torah institution is what it really boils down to. Supporting a Torah institution is Hamidu Talmidim Harbeh, right? Because if, let's say, for example, when there's Birkat Moshe or somewhere else, they need, I'll make up now, they need $1 million to run their institution a year. They have $500,000. So they can't necessarily pay their teachers. Maybe the teacher's going to look for a job somewhere else. If I give $500,000 and I fill in that gap, right? I should be able to give that money away. It won't be my money. I'm going to steal it. So, but I'll be a tzaddik. I'll get my name somewhere. Oh, this isn't the United States. Sorry. So that's on tape. Great. Okay, the secretary with disability knowledge of that statement. What I did was I was the Hamid Talmidim Harbeh. I enabled more Torah to be learned. And we all have that ability. When you give a little money in a tzedakah box, whatever it might be, we all have that opportunity and the ability to do something like that. So that's also another idea of Hamidu Talmidim Harbeh. What about Vasu Siag LaTorah? You should make a fence around the Torah. The Siag is a fence, the fence, safer Torah, right? I know exactly what you're thinking. Safer, it's safer Torah, right? Okay. The pasuk says in Vayikra Yudchet, Ushmartem et Mishmarti. You should watch my watching. Okay, that's perfectly clear. So Chachamim say it means Vasu Mishmeret leMishmarti. You have to make a protection for my statutes, for my laws, for my rules. What does that mean? First of all, what does the word siag mean? So it means a geder, which means a fence. If you walk down the street, you walk by an electric box, there's a sign on it. If you can't read the Hebrew, it basically says danger of death. Okay, that's a pretty scary statement, right? Why don't they just leave it open? Well, obviously, because danger of death. They want to make sure you're protected. As far as the electricity working, that box is not necessary. The box that closes off the electrical panels outside in the street and all, it's not necessary. The electricity we work with or without them, maybe the rains have to protect the cover, the top, but they're to protect us from coming too close. So that's what the concept of siyag or gather is. The Avot says something interesting. I'm going to read to you. Mishum shein maskana, you don't have this in front of the sheet on this. Mishum shein maskanato oseket beisurim mefurashim, el behidurim bechasidut. Since this is not referring to halacha, that this is the halacha of something or a conclusion of an idea of something that's prohibited or not prohibited, but rather we're talking about the idea of hidurim, like enhancements to a mitzvah, or chasidut, which you talked about in Mishnayot, the concept of being a little bit more pious in what you do. Therefore, the Yavitz describes the word siyag not just as a fence or protection, but rather as chizuk, as in strengthening your mitzvah. That I'm going to protect myself by having the concept of muksa on Shabbat, right? I want to walk around with a pen. I can if I want to on Shabbat. Chachamim say, no, muksa, put it away. You might use it. What have I done? It's not that I have protected myself from myself, I have, but more than that, I've been mechazek, I've strengthened my way to keep this particular mitzvah. In addition to that, every single generation has different needs. The needs in the turn of the century, the 19th, 18th, 17th, 20th centuries, 21st centuries are different. Today, one of the areas we need chizuk in may be the internet. It may be achdut or achdus in so many different ways. And then in the early 20th century, the chizuk needed, the encouragement needed, the strength needed was just learning Torah, because after the end of World War II, which is of course the middle of the 20th century, late first half, the obituary was already written for the Orthodox Jewish communities. I mean, that was it. They were decimated, wiped out, and the little bit of Torah that was brought to the shores of the United States was, okay, there's going to be a handful of people in Torah, and that's going to be it. And yet, what happens, we know that it flourished, thanks to a handful of people and organizations. And how did that happen? Again, they were mechazek. They strengthened the people, but they didn't start talking to them about, oh, you know what, you make sure when you keep Shabbat, make sure you do Rabbeinu Tam and finish it a half hour later. That wasn't the issue. Get yourself a chumash. Get yourself a Gemara, get yourself a teacher. We have to open another institution. That was the chizuk that was given. Maybe in the late 18th century, early 19th century is more about self-preservation, for the importance of life and family, to make sure you protect yourselves. Whatever it might be, every generation has its own. So it's also not just the siyag, the Torah of what we're learning in the mitzvah, what we're doing, but it's also the idea of a protective measure for Am Yisrael. That's on the grand scale, the macro scale, but on the micro scale, we have to think about ourselves. When we come to Elul, it's not that far away, ready? Just joking. When you come to, it's just down the street. When we come to Elul, when we come to the month before Rosh Hashanah, people start having more towards the idea of introspection. And they think about what they've done, then what they want to do. If you do it right, part of the idea of thinking about what you've done is not just about, okay, how you're going to not do that in the future, but it's also how you're going to take measures to protect yourself from yourself in the future. We've talked about this before when we did Mishnayot Yesharim and other things. That's also a siyag b'Torah, is not just a general statement to the leaders. It's also to every individual. We have to take protective measures for ourselves, because maybe it's possible that the halacha, the way it is, doesn't protect me from myself, because I know that I'm going to mess up, so therefore I will do X. That's also you're taking the advice of siyag b'Torah. But why is it the job of the leaders of the generation to do this? Why is it their job? I mean, everyone has responsibility for themselves. Why do I have to rely on the leaders of the generation to say, okay, here's how we have to straighten out the people, here's what we have to do? Because that's why they're in that position. By default or by having put into that position, the job of the leader, the job of someone who's in charge of a generation, and it's not like they're card high. David Schwartz in charge of generation. They don't have a business card, but by default, we know that the upper tier within the Datilumi world and the Haredi world and the whatever world you're talking about, there are certain people who are seen as the leaders. Why is it they have such a responsibility? Because when they mess up and they don't do what needs to be done, it's on their shoulders. It's on their shoulders. The leaders of Am Yisrael, let's say, for example, there's a conference in the United States. Torah Masorah, if you're familiar with them or not, Torah Masorah, huge organization, have to do with education, just had a conference. And let's say, I'm making this up, they did not do this, that, we need chizuk in music, and you have to make sure you only listen to a certain type of music, and have a 3-day conference about music and the right thing and the wrong thing. But they completely missed the boat on the fact that, that there's this big split in Am Yisrael, and they're not talking about unity, and they're not talking about how, there's all the infighting, they're not even talking about the war, and they leave that out. Okay, they didn't do this. I say they have completely missed the boat. That's not leadership. Absolutely not. They also say a generation gets the leaders they deserve. So we have to look at our leaders and see what's going on. So there's I'm quoting Spider-Man, I think, that with great with great power comes great responsibility. And that's very true. And they have great power and they have great responsibility. And you know that because sometimes you'll hear a quote from some leader and it's like, oh my God, how could he have said that? And that's everywhere on the internet and it gets passed around and there's memes made about it right away. And yet if you or I said it, like, okay, big deal, right? Because what they say, all of us, I think, I'm old enough to remember when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen, right? Yeah, when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. Okay, so you be careful if you're E.F. Hutton. Okay. Let us take a look at the second Mishnah. Second Mishnah starts with a man whose name you know, because if you've been to Yerushalayim and you've been on the light rail, it's the Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Just. I will, in some of these Mishnayot, give a little biography of certain people. I'm not going to give too much about him, but some others I will. Shimon HaTzadik, he was the last man of the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah. The first Mishnah referred to the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, the men of the Great Assembly. He said that began at the time of Ezra. The time of Ezra is the time of the Shivat Zion, the return to Zion after the 70 years of approximately of exile in Babylon / Persia. They come back and Ezra establishes this idea of the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah. They establish many things in Judaism. Is made up of both of Nevi'im, prophets, and very important people, such as Mordechai, is in the story of Mordechai. And it ends with the time period of Shimon HaTzadik, second Beit HaMikdash, where there's no more Anshe Knesset HaGdolah. They did many things important, such as established Shemona Esrei. They wrote Shemona Esrei. We will discuss that, obviously, at length in the Tefillah class. He has the distinction, Shimon HaTzadik, of being one of the few graves in all of Israel that we know for a fact, generation to generation, that he's actually buried where it says he's buried. Many of the graves, including Shmuel Hanavi, Nebi Samuel, including, believe it or not, Mama Rachel, Kever Rachel, maybe not be the actual resting place of that individual. And David HaMelech also, Avshalom, right? They write. But that's not the Avshalom. That the Yad Avshalom is he made. That's not his grave. It's not his grave. That he built that for himself. Yeah, that little monument to himself because he was so great. Yes, a little couple of shpitz like that. I've actually never been there. I don't think. But so wait a minute. So if Rachel's not really buried there, then why we all go there? So there's the idea that over centuries, the Jews have given certain level of importance and kedusha to something that it's imbued with kedusha. Maybe she is, maybe she's not buried there. There's a chance that Shmuel is more buried in the area in Yerushalayim called Ramot, somewhere in that area, because he was from Ramah, that area, that's where he was from. But okay, but still, it has a level of kedusha. We do know, of course, that the Machpelah is where it is, and Hebron. But like I say, as far as individuals, Shimon HaTzadik has one of the few graves that we know 100%. Doesn't mean that they are, others aren't, but it is his is. My daughter and son-in-law lived like up the stairs right behind the kever in Sheikh Jarrah / Shimon HaTzadik for about a year. They had these chut to daven many times. It's very, and they have a kolo. I don't know if you know that they actually have a kolo inside. It's inside of a building. If you've never been, it's actually really cool to go. Really is. Now, and what you can do when you do that is you take the Pirke Avot with you and you read what he said. You go to Beit Sha'arim up north. You go to the burial grounds where Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi is buried, the author of the Mishnah. You read Mishnah. It's the coolest thing. You realize that the words of the person that wrote them are right there, or said them, are right there. So Shimon HaTzadik says as follows: Hayam Misharei Knesset HaGdolah, was from the end of the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah. Hu haya omer, who used to say, Al Shlosha Dvarim HaOlam Omed, on three things the world exists or stands: Al Torah, Ve'al HaAvodah, Ve'al Gemilut Chasadim. On Torah, work, I'm using that in quotes, and chesed. Now, we have a number of things to talk about here. First is the expression. This is the first time I already referenced it before. This is the first time we see it in writing. Hu haya omer, he used to say, is not he said. Like it doesn't say Shimon HaTzadik Amar or Omer. He said he used to say. That meant that among many things he said, this is what he was known for. He was always saying that this idea was the case. Three things the world rests upon: Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim. And we're going to see that phrase dozens of times throughout Pirkei Avot. That's first of all. That's just one basic idea. Second of all, I want, if you can, look at the Mishnah and ask me a stylistic or linguistic kind of question. Not about the meaning of anything, just a stylistic question. Especially if you're into language or grammar, you'll pick up something. No, on the Al Shloshah Dvarim Ha'olam Hamed, Al HaTorah Ve'Avodah Ve'al Gemilut Chasadim. Yes, I'll tell you the question. Okay, maybe. Okay, I think I'd be. Huh? What about Gemilut Chasadim? No, I mean, could be. I mean, everything you're saying is right. It's not what I'm going with. That's fine. So I'm going to mention the question, and we're going to come back to it. It says Al HaTorah, on the Torah, Al HaAvodah, on the work. It should say Al Gemilut HaChasadim. It should also have a Hey HaYidiyah. Hey HaYidiyah is the English equivalent of the you say, what's the word? No, the definite article though. Yes, very good. Thank you. You paid attention. I'm impressed. It's amazing how much I am forgetting in English. It's not even funny. The definite article the. For example, I have a ball. If I have the ball, it means there's something specific about it. So here it says the Torah, the work, but it doesn't say the Gemilut Chasadim. Or it should just say Al Torah, Al Avodah, Al Gemilut Chasadim. So that's one question. I'm going to come back to that in a couple of minutes. I do want to point out, if you turn for a moment to the 18th Mishnah, Yudchet, same chapter, I think. Yes, the last chapter, the last Mishnah of the first chapter. Okay, see it? It says, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Hamed, the three things upon which the world stands, Al Hadin, Ve'al Ha'emet, Ve'al Ha'shalom. By the way, you'll notice that all three have a hey. That's not my point here. He says it has to do with judgment, it has to do with truth, it has to do with peace. But notice the verb. Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam, on three things the world, Omed, stands. Our Mishnah says, Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Omed, right? Do you have Omed or do you have Kayam? Ah, thank you. There are two different Girsaot. There are two different versions. One is, everyone says in this Mishnah, Ha'olam Omed, the world stands on three things. The other opinion in the last Mishnah is Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Kayam, exists. okay, or is perpetuated, endures. Okay, that's a better, actually, it's a very good translation. So let's go with the fact that there are two different verbs. I want to know, why do you think, not why you think, but why is it that they would use two different verbs? They have different opinions upon which the world stands. That's fine. But why use different verbs? It would seem that they are different, that the girsah, that the version of omed and kayam are different in the actual original. There is a commentary known as the Rashbetz. Let me just find, I have a note here. I can tell you a little bit. Here. Now, I'm going to quote him a lot during this series. But I want to tell you who he was. The Rashbetz was of Shimon ben Tzemach Duran from Mallorca, Spain. He lived from 1361 to 1444, so late 14th, early 15th century. He was a doctor. So you have a lot of doctors, you know. My son, the doctor, right? And his profession was, he was a doctor in Aragon. And as was true with many famous people, we know, as because of Gzerot Shmad, which were prohibitions of learning Torah and all, he ran and moved to Algeria, which he evidently wrote most of his commentary there. So that was the Rashbetz. Okay, so he says that the Mishnah here that we're talking about means that the world was created for these three things. And the other Mishnah means that the world is sustained or endures these three things. Now, is he right or wrong? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make a difference. But because I'm saying that there are many different possibilities about how to explain this. We have the Rabbeinu Bachya. He says that the Tana is really saying that the world exists only on one thing. We're going to come back to this in this Mishnah, but endures because of three things. Let's come back now. Let's go back to the beginning of this particular Mishnah. Why is it that we have the hay, right? We have haTorah al ha'avodah al gviv chasadim. That's one. Another thing is, when it says three things, you'll notice that it doesn't tell us what avodah is. It says work, right? So what kind of work is it we're talking about? Service of what? Service of Hashem. Tefillah. Ah, very good. Very good. So you're both right. So the first one, Torah, should be pretty straightforward. The Torah, the world was created because of the Torah. Without the Torah, there's no world. Nothing would exist. There's always, at some moment, someone learning Torah in the world, otherwise it wouldn't exist. And just think about the way the world works, about the circle of the world, the sphere. There's always someone who's learning Torah. So we have the Torah. The avodah, the question is, what is it? So we see that most will say it was during the time of the Beit HaMikdash, it was korbanot. How is that? Why are those so important? Why are the sacrifices so important? That it's one of the things that when the world exists or was formed because of that. What was the purpose of korbanot? What was the purpose of that? The sacrifices? Just look at the word itself. The word korbanot, the shoresh is kuf resh bet, he'd karev, come close. Purpose wasn't to kill animals, to burn things, and to have a barbecue every day. The purpose was, for various reasons, to come closer to Hashem through these korbanot. So anything that would perpetuate a closer relationship with Hashem was indicated by avodah. Once the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, then it was our tefillah that made the difference in how we come closer to Hashem. That's Torah and avodah. And Gvilot Chasadim is chesed. Okay, we're going to translate that in a minute, but I want to mention for a second, why is it haTorah, ha'avodah, and Gvilot Chasadim? We said that the definite article "the" means you can point to something, right? It's the book. I can actually say this is the book. So I can say the Torah. I can say here's my chumash. This is the reason that the Torah, the world exists. I can also point to the avodah. I can say this is my sidur. This is my korban. You can, in theory, point to chesed, right? Look at what I did for that person. But you don't want to, because you want to do it privately. Your gemilut chasadim should not be publicized. You shouldn't go around saying, look what I did. You want to share with someone to encourage them? Absolutely should, and definitely should do that. Great example, the fact that there's an ambucycle, right? In memory of Avot, ambutractor, and right, that needs to be publicized because that's fantastic. It also encourages other people. But if I went to the store and I picked up something for the axiomatic little old lady who can't cross the street for herself. I'm not going to come and say, you know what I did this before I came here. I went shopping for somebody, picked up all the. Shut up. That's for you, right? So it doesn't require a hey hayidya because it's not supposed to be yadua. It's not supposed to be known. It's supposed to be private. Okay. And the more you perpetuate that, once it becomes gimilut hachasadim, you start boasting about it, then you're really messing with the foundation of the world in a sense. In addition to that, we also know there's a pasuk in Tehillim that says, "Olam chesed yibaneh." The world is built on chesed, unless you believe the ancient times they believed. I don't know if you know this. It was held up by giant elephants. I don't know if you know that. There's a belief that the world was supported by elephants. Why elephants? I don't know. Huh? An atlas, but he shrugged and it fell off. So we have to understand that there's these three things, but one, it really has to be to say this privately. So Torah should be public. You should encourage people to learn. You should try to teach Torah. And when it comes to avodah, you want it to be public. You want to be part of the public, whether it's davening in minyan or making sure people daven and be part of the culture. It's in schools. Gilach Hasadim should be a private thing. But this interesting comment also made. Torah, I don't remember who said this. Maybe it's the Rabbeinu Bachya. Yeah, Rabbeinu Bachya said something fascinating. The Torah is the mitzvot hatliyot b'peh. These kind of mitzvot are mitzvot that have to do with speech. Avodah, mitzvot hatliyot balev, are mitzvot that have to do with the heart. And gemilut chasadim are mitzvot that have to do with action. So let's think about those three words. Peh, mouth. Lev is our heart or mind. And maaseh is action. For those of you who learn Tanya or have learned Tanya, this should sound familiar. This is the idea of machshava, dibur, maaseh. Thought, speech, and action. All based on the pasuk, ki karov elecha davar meod beficha, yuvavcha la'asoto. The matter, keeping Torah, is exceedingly close to you in your mouth, your heart, and to do it. This Mishnah is giving you encouragement, it's giving you chizuk in making sure that what you are doing in your life, the fact that we're sitting here learning Torah, the fact that you all do acts of chesed. I'm saying you should have like a WhatsApp group. The chesed I've done today, so really publicize it. Just kidding. Okay. Or just it should be called "Look at Me." The fact that you daven in whatever way you daven, the fact that you are in a community of Torah, that's taking this mission and putting it to life. Because again, it's not just a statement. You're helping to sustain the world. This is either the reason the world was created, depending on the perspective, or what sustains the world. So every one of us has a hand in doing that as well. What is gemilut chasadim? What does that mean? So I want to mention something also from the category of don't ever take something for granted. If you open up the local phone book here, when you're little, if you had the booster seat, you put the phone book, right? The Chicago white pages, the yellow pages like this. Well, not the yellow pages anymore. Now what do? You're a little, doesn't boost them up. So if you look in a local phone book, you'll find a section that says gemach. What's a gemach? It stands for, it's a loan, right? But it stands for gemilut chasadim. That's where it comes from. It's a contraction, two words. Gemilut chasadim. Gemach. Gimel mem chet. If you spell it right, it's gimel mem chukchik, like the little quote, chet. Why is it called a gemach? So you said it's a loan. Excellent. Because one of the well-known aspects of a gemach is to loan money or loan things. I have a wedding gemach. I have a party gemach. I have a loan gemach, right? Because that's the idea. But why is it called a gemach? Because it's an act of chesed. You own something, right? Let's say I own, wedding shtick. Okay? And I bought it. And I loan it out. And I get it back afterwards. The Brownsteins have, for Purim, they have a costume gemach. There are many people in our community that have various gemachim. It's a form of chesed. Okay. But I want to kind of just spend a couple minutes on a definition of chesed that I don't think is my original definition. I'm pretty sure I've heard this somewhere, but I've internalized it, and I have gotten pushback on it. So don't have to accept. It's because I'm very humble, like God. I say that. And I've used this example. I think we talked about maybe already in this class. For sure, we talked about Mishnayot Sharim, but it fits here. Yocheved says, oh my gosh, I'm completely out of napkins. I said, oh, I'm going to my Makolet. I'll pick up some napkins for you. No problem. I go to my Makolet, I pick up napkins, drop them off at her place. Is that a chesed? Absolutely not. It's not a chesed. It's what I'm supposed to do. She asked for a favor. I have to. I'm not going out of my way. Even if I'm already going there, why can't I just pick it up for her? That's not a chesed. That's what you're supposed to do as a ben adam, as a human being. You help somebody out. I go to the Makolet and they don't have napkins. I know she really needs them for tonight. She has a big party tonight. You didn't invite me. That's okay. I said, oh, you know what? I know they just got a shipment of napkins at my Yom 2000. I'll go over there. I go in there, buy the napkins, and I bring it to her. That's a chesed. What's the difference? I went out of my way. I did it. I went above and beyond. When you go above and beyond, you go outside your comfort zone. You go outside of yourself. There's in a meet we have every year a different theme. It's not this year's theme. There's last year's. Say me atzmecha. Literally means go out of yourself. Okay, you have what you normally would do, but when you stretch yourself just a little bit, it doesn't mean I spent a week looking for the right napkins. It means I went out an extra 5 minutes. And what I brought them to you. That's already a chesed. It doesn't minimize helping somebody when they need, right? Can I borrow a pen? It's not a chesed, right? But it's doing the right thing. So we have to make a distinction between doing the right thing versus doing the right thing plus. And the right thing plus is the act of chesed. What does it mean, gimilut chesed? What's gimul? It means a payment in a sense. I'm going to talk about that next week a little bit more. But when we bestow a chesed on somebody also, why is that so important to do chesed? Why? What we really think it's so entrenched in us, it's so ingrained in us to do chesed for another person. But why is that so important? It falls into the category of mahu afata. Just like he is, you should be. In Latin, it's an expression, imitatio Dei, which literally means to imitate God. Gemara talks about this idea, mahu rachum afataro. Just like God is merciful, you should be merciful. Just like Hashem does visiting Bikur Cholim, you should do Bikur Cholim. Hashem is all about chesed. Remember? Olam chesed yibaneh. The world is built on chesed. So when we do a chesed, we're doing God's work in a sense. I don't sound like an evangelical there, but we're doing Hashem's work in this world. We're acting as the shlichim or the messengers of God to do chesed. She needed those napkins. It could have driven her nuts. She didn't have the right napkins, and I made her happy. Okay, big deal to me, right? I've said before. I give the example I gave was with someone here with no name. The day of Andy's mom's funeral, we were going to take a taxi, we take a bus just to the cemetery, not here, to Harmanuchot. And someone called me up and said, my car is just going to sit outside all day. I know you've offered your car before, and others have offered their car to me before for other reasons. And she said, here's the key. Just come get it and bring the car back afterwards. It made the world a difference. What did she do? She did this. She went in her pocket. She did this. She handed me a key. Absolutely nothing. It's no different than going to grab a Kleenex to blow your nose. But what she did was absolute chesed. Why? It changed that day for us, for the family. She didn't go above and beyond. So I just contradicted myself, right? So it's not going above and beyond only. It also is, what is the effect of what you're doing? That was a massive effect for us. Sometimes it is just a little thing that ends up being a massive act of chesed. So it's from both sides. She may say, well, that was so nice. You really didn't have to go, but okay, great. Thanks a lot. But I really did go out of my side. I did something. I went above and beyond. I went out of my comfort zone maybe or something. But in this case of the key, all she did was hand the key to me. But it made a massive difference for me. So it's both the giver and the receiver. It's a package deal you have to look at. And that's one of the reasons, because it is doing Hashem's work in this world, why we have to say that it's such a critical part, according to Shimon HaTzadik, that he put it into his 3 basics. We'll continue next week, Bezrat Hashem. And in the meantime, go out there and do all kinds of chesed. Yes. Yes.